Hi, welcome to Sustainable Success Show. I'm your host, Chris Salem. Hope all is well. Hope everyone's having a great week. We are so excited that this show has done extremely well over the last 9 years. And it's thanks to you, the listeners that have been with us from day one. Now, as some of the old timers know, we've been with Voice America for over 8 years. And we recently went to a new platform back in January of this year, where now we're providing a video to our show. And we scaled down from an hour to a half an hour to make sure we accommodated you in terms of how you like to process and digest content that you can utilize to take to your business to the next level. If anybody is new and first time here, we want to welcome you. We also want to encourage you to also to follow us on YouTube at Christopher R. Salem. Also, you could follow us and subscribe to our Apple channel. That would be Spotify, also iHeart, and Amazon Music. And in addition, you could always follow us on Facebook at Sustainable Success 2017. There you'll find almost 500 episodes that we've covered over almost a 9 year period with this show. And we are excited again to be serving you each and every week here, always on Friday, here at 12 noon East Coast time, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Uh, the show is being brought to you, as always, by Alumni Direct. Alumni Direct is a social media community platform dedicated to bringing alumni together from all different generational types and an opportunity to meet new people for the first time. Now, it is a membership program taking out all the noise out of social media. You get to generate genuine and authentic relationships with the people you choose to interact with. If you'd like some more information about Alumni Direct, check them out at alumnidirect.com. That's alumnidirect.com. Well, I'm excited to be talking about this subject today. As you know, here at Sustainable Success, we are always committed at looking at challenges in the workplace and in business, even on an individual level, and how we can make that better to turn that into opportunities and then results for more sustainability long term. We're going to be talking about why success quietly breaks down long before anyone notices. And most failures don't happen suddenly; they happen quietly. Well, you're going to be learning all about that today, and I'm excited to be hearing from our guest today, Richard Brew, and a little bit of background about Richard. He is a senior project and product management executive with over 40 years of leadership experience driving strategic execution, operational transformation, and commercialization success across manufacturing, advanced materials, and technology sectors. Now, he's an expert in residence at Lawrence Technological University, Central Polis Business Accelerator, advising startups and existing companies on structuring and implementing sustainable product and project matter governance frameworks, establishing measurable KPIs, and optimizing their projects as well as their new product development and commercialization processes. Now, he's also the founder of True North Consulting Incorporated, and he provides contract, interim, and temporary advisory services in the area of project management, also product management, and new product development and commercialization. Now, he was also a former CEO of a medical packaging company, and I'm going to let him, I could keep going on and on and on, but I'm going to let him share a lot of his words and wisdom here with us today on this topic. And without further ado, we welcome Richard Brew to the show. Richard, how are you doing today?
Good, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. And we always like to go into the backstory, Richard, first to kick things off, kind of set the tone and the foundation to what you're going to be talking about today. Talk a little bit about, why a lot of times people when they see success, you know, drifting away from them, why all of a sudden like it happens unexpectedly and they don't really see the signs coming.
Right. Well, in my line of work, it sort of starts way at the beginning when you want to decide what you want to do with a product or a project. And it starts with first thing is what do I want to do? What is the scope of this thing? What's in scope? What's out of scope? A lot of companies don't take enough time upfront to figure that out. Well, I want to go make this new computer mouse. Well, okay, how's it going to be different than existing mouses? And what are going to be the features and the benefits versus what's out there? A lot of small to medium-sized companies that I do a lot of work with, they just get this idea and they start to roll. Well, did you think about what's in scope and what's out of scope? Do you have the resources? Is the technology already on the shelf, or is this something you got to go out and invent? And the one I love the most is, did you think about the risk here? I mean, now you got all these issues, but you never thought these things could come up, and now they're here, and you're saying, well, wait a minute, what do I do with this? So it all starts in the beginning. And if you don't do that upfront planning and before you execute, you've already started the cancer in the project.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. So, Richard, when we look at this particular area that you're talking to us about here today, talk a little bit about like what are some of the things that, project managers, no matter what level they are, in terms of what role they play in that area, even with product management and development, what are some of the things that they could start to do to recognize these signs?
Well, the first thing that I would suggest is when you are handed an assignment as a product or a project manager, clearly from your stakeholder, clearly get a definition of what they want and ask the five whys. Get to the root cause of, okay, why? So you fully understand what the overall objective is. Commit it to a piece of paper. And that piece of paper should say, this is what we're going to accomplish. This is in scope. This is out of scope. But you got to go further than that. Okay. Then you got to take a look at, do we have the vendor base? Do we have the resources? And the big thing for me is, yeah, budgets, you can figure that. It's the risk. What are your risks? A lot of companies don't put enough effort into that. And that's when they start to see the cancer, but they don't
Yeah.
see the cancer until it's right in front of their face and going, I never thought of that. And now I'm completely derailed. That's the biggest thing I see companies don't do enough of. Risk. What is it? How are you going to handle it? Who's going to handle it? And what triggers that risk? Because if you can see the trigger, the risk never shows up.
Yeah. So with that, I mean, again, like with anything, risk is necessary to move forward, but sometimes people are resistant to risk. So could it be that it's just that fear of risk and thus why they could be ignoring those signs?
I think it's more of companies not figuring out how risk averse they are.
Okay,
If
got
I'm a
it.
project manager and you're my sponsor, I'm going to ask you, we can do this, but here are the risks. Are you willing to accept that those risks may occur? But it's incumbent upon me to give you what the triggers are for those risks, what they look like, what the impact of that risk will be, and how that risk will be dealt with if it shows up. That's how you get your hands around that risk. You got to figure out your risk threshold.
Wow, that's great. That's great. And what would be, if you could share with us, Richard, what would be the first steps they could start taking to make, either now recognize that and make some changes?
Well, the first thing, I'll stay in risk for a second, is there's this little tool called the risk register that's used in planning a project. And each risk is listed in order of priority. It's evaluated for probability and impact. Some people want to put a dollar volume to it. Some people want to put a numerical number to it. But that's the first thing you have to do when you get beyond what the scope is. And so a lot of companies I deal with don't even know what a risk register is. They'll put together a business case and they'll work off a business case. And I'm saying, but that's not the same thing. And a business case is a business case. I'm coming to you as my boss, Christopher, and I'm saying,
Yeah.
this is what I want to do. This is what I think it's going to yield. And you're going to say, Richard, that's very good. Now I want you to take that deeper. Okay. And I want you to put together a project charter. I want to see budget. I want to see risk. I want to see resources. I want to see what the project management plan is going to look like. And then and only then will I approve moving forward. A lot of companies will just do the business case, X risk, escalate out of the cost planning and resource planning. Let's go. And I think that's inherent in a lot of smaller to medium-sized companies. The bigger companies, like I worked at GE, that would never happen. You'd be fired if you still worked off a business case. But but I mean, you really have to, you really have to do the work up front to make sure while you're executing, you're going to have minimal issues and you're going to get you're going to go where you want to go and get what you want to get. If you don't do that, then it's sort of like finger to the wind. Let's see where we're going to go.
So, and what can be some, what can organizations, can they put certain things in place now? Like, obviously it starts with awareness, training, things that you could bring to the light and is it going to be different among different types of people? Because I never like to assume, but I always say, a lot of times project managers and product development or product management, they tend to be more analytical in their
Oh
approach.
yeah.
So with that, like, making sure organizations understand that, so it's not how you speak to one person's the same to others. So you got to make sure you're aligning to the way they process things in order for them to recognize that.
Right. In the context of project management or product management, the framework is the same. In other words, there are certain tools and techniques that you can apply regardless of industry that will keep you focused on what you need to learn in order to execute. So, for instance, when I go in and I train a company, the first thing I train them on, I give them some tools. I give them a project scope management tool where we go through what's in scope, what's out of scope, what are the assumptions and constraints on the project. We talk about, vendor needs, resource needs. We get it all on the table because that from that document, you now to begin the other documents or framework, if you will. And so I think it's important when a company that's struggling with project or product management is to go back to that document, which I call the scope document, because the quality of that will affect the quality of the project management plan. So, my dad used to say, son, if you crap in, crap out. All right. So you got to make sure you're as tight as you can up front, because if you don't get that, you are asking for failure. You're not asking for it, but it's going to come find you, and then you're going to say, "Well, why did this happen?" It all starts with that first piece of work.
Great. I love that. And I hope listeners, those that are, in this particular field with project management, product development, as well as managing products and in your organizations, that you're taking note of this. What would you advise, Richard, would be like some of the next steps, that they could start to now, improve on being more proactive to catch these things before before now they're reacting to, these breakdowns.
I talked about the triggers. A
Yep.
risk becomes an issue when it's in your living room and it's right on top of you, right? So first, think about what will trigger that risk. So if you and I are working on a project, and we're trying to frame it out, and I say to you, well, the cost of steel could go up 25%. You might say to me, well, Richard, what's the trigger? What am I looking? What's the trigger I'm looking for so that when I see that trigger and I see the finger going to it, I can stop the bullet coming my way? That would be one of the first things I do. If someone is struggling with projects right now, I say, stop, just, slow down and go forward. What is it that is impacting you right now? Figure out the root cause of that one triggered it, and then you put in the root cause corrective action. You just don't go by chance it could happen again. That's the first thing when I walk in on a company that's having issues. That's one of the first things I look for. Okay, this has happened. Why did this happen? What was the trigger for that? What could you have done to figure out what that trigger looked like when you were doing all this upfront work so the trigger never got pulled?
Yeah. Wow. Powerful. I love that what you shared there. And what would be like, in terms of, without naming any, of course, anything, particular names or anything like that, but like, are there certain, like, where you see this happening more in certain industries with project management and product management as well? Or is this pretty much universal?
It Among small to medium-sized companies, I'm saying 50 million to maybe 500 million.
Yep.
Those are the companies that I hear from. Those are the companies I interface with. And they experience that because they either don't have the expertise on staff in project management. So, well, we have Rich Bruce, the engineer, so Rich is going to run the program. So I'm going to run it like an engineer. I'm going to break it down the way an engineer would, but I'm looking at it from, from the perspective of an engineer. It's like a horse with blinders. I got to get the blinders off.
Yeah. That's it. And do you recommend like, people like yourself, because this is what you do, and you're able to kind of approach it from an unbiased viewpoint, and sometimes you could share with them the hard truths because you gotta, if you don't really understand what the challenge is that could now be causing this, what can now be changed to make it better, then nothing gets better. So do
Right.
you recommend that if this is something now that is becoming a problem and they're seeing more of this, that they do seek outside resources like yourself, to help them because it's that's a great investment in their time and bottom line.
Very much so. And I get calls from CEOs, COOs, CTOs, continuous improvement managers. The funny thing about what I do for a living, or any project manager that's an independent, is we're sort of like, and believe me, I'm not a doctor, but we're sort of like a doctor. We get a call, I have a problem. So, you got to go in and you got to consult, which is what the right thing to do. But, that's usually when folks like myself get sought out. And, what I find that's interesting in projects in general, only 31% of all projects are successful. That means they're on budget, they're on time, they deliver everything that was asked for. 50% of projects are stressed or strained. That means they're either over budget, they're over scope, they scope creep, but there's some issue there. And so they don't come in on budget on time and they don't deliver all that they are supposed to deliver. And the remaining 19%, they just fail because of poor planning and poor execution. But of that, so 31% make it, 69%, basically don't. Of that 69%, 47% has to do with how people plan and execute a project.
Mm.
I mean, think about that. I
Yeah.
mean, and those statistics, by the way, have not changed over the last several years. So as far as project management goes, we have a long way to go, a long way to go to improve in general.
Got it. Got it. Well, that, it's always great, always to hear the truth because that's how we get better. We have to recognize that. And, now that you're sharing this and you're enlightening, so many organizations, even those that listen to sustainable success each and every week, I know that, this has got to be part of, obviously project management, product management, development. It's all part of their strategy, but also what you said that you got to also have something in place to start recognizing where these breakdowns can start happening earlier rather than now when you said when it's just like right there and it just hits you right in the face right at that
Right.
time and you missed that out on all the different cues and warning signs
Yep.
beforehand. Like what, like I said, like just is there like a certain thing, like I know you mentioned a few things already, but like that they can put something in place to
Yeah.
now it's part of their
Yeah.
strategy to mitigate or even offset these from even getting to that level.
Absolutely. One of the other observations I have with small to medium-sized companies is they don't do what I would call a formal stage gate review. So, I have to come to you as the engineer leader, the president, and in the stage gate, I would have to accomplish X, Y, and Z with a budget. And I come to you, I report my progress, say, okay, you can go into the next phase now. A lot of informality, if you will, in certain companies where the surprises come out during the meeting. What do you mean you're 10,000 over budget? So one of the things I look for is, do you have a stage gate or some type of cadence where if these problems you're starting to smell them, you can at least smell them and say, okay, I'm smelling it. It's not in the room yet. It's coming. So what are we going to do about it? Because I don't like the smell. A lot of companies don't take the time to do that. And it doesn't have to be a formal stage gate process, but do you have a cadence, a regular cadence where you go over the project, not just in scope, but from budget, but from resources, but from risk, that you cover everything associated with that project so there's no funky smell coming in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot
No,
of a lot of companies, well, it's, we go to Bob in engineering. I mean, he's running and talk to Bob. Well, that's great, but Bob, there's other people involved here.
exactly. Exactly. Wow, this is great. And listeners, again, we want to encourage everybody. You want to go back and watch this episode again. When you hear something, but you hear it, but there might be something else that, again, when you hear it the second time, it really sinks in because Richard has shared a lot of valuable insights. Richard, what would be like some things that you would recommend to any project manager? It could be a product manager, anybody involved in that area. If they're listening to this now that they have an idea,
Right.
to give them that confidence, it's that it's okay that hey, these things happen. That happens to the best of us, but knowing that it's to own it, to be accountable, and begin to kind of look into the things that you shared
Right.
here that can now help them if in fact their company perhaps has not done that,
Right.
for them to take the initiative. Anything that you could share with them that might help them to do that.
Yeah, being a project or a product manager, as you know, is a very tough position because you've been entrusted to make something happen. You're the captain. You might not be fully empowered as a captain, but you're the captain. It's all going to come down to you. So when someone approaches you to do a new product development or a project, make sure that you have everything clearly defined, meaning what's in scope, what's out of scope, assumptions and constraints. Okay. Do not accept the responsibility until that is abundantly clear. Because if you accept it with not knowing where it's going or what's required, ultimately you will be the one that will be criticized and pay the price. So that's why it's a tough decision, because if you're the executive VP and I'm just little peon Richard, engineering guy, right? I have to be astute enough to say, Christopher, I want to do this, but I am not clear with what you're asking of me here. I can see it physically, but outside that shell, I got to get in the shell, Christopher. You got to help me get there so I can help you. So please help me.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, some valuable insight there. I love that. Is there anything that we haven't covered yet, Richard, that you think is going to be imperative and really important now, what you're sharing with us today for all of those involved directly and indirectly in and around project and product management and development? Anything that we have not covered yet you feel is compelling now for the audience to hear?
Yes. I know you work with leaders of companies, and I do too. And I can tell you that they have a responsibility to their project and product managers. Why? Because they're the ones that are asking for something to be done. The worst thing that can happen to a project or a project manager is your project sponsor from leadership goes missing in action, or you do not have access to the proper people in leadership to help you pull through, push through certain issues. So, my message to leadership when I speak to them is one, you have not just a fiduciary responsibility, but a human responsibility to make sure the success of your people, whether that's giving them the resources they need, the counsel they need. So, that's another area where projects fail because the sponsor or leadership goes MIA. So that's very important because if you're a soldier out there with no support from home base, it's just not going to work.
That is so true. So true. Really valuable insights. And as we get near the end of the show, I wanted to see if you can just kind of connect the dots to everything you shared here with us today, like almost like if you're summarizing, but connecting the dots to give the listeners here that where this is applicable, a call of action to do something with this.
Yeah. Well, to my fellow project and product managers and to the leaders that may be listening, pulling it all together is it all starts up front with what you want to accomplish. That's called scope. If you mess that up, or if you don't put your effort into that, you're not going to get what you want. You're going to spend more money and more time. Number one. Number two, you have to have some formality, some documentation of what you're going to accomplish so that as you move through the project and you go through reviews, you have something to come back and focus on. For example, in a sprint review in agile project management, right? We said we were going to do this. Did we do this? Did we do all of this or part of this? And the reason why I harp on project scope is that is the heart. That is the heart of a project. The project management plan itself is the soul. Okay, that's going to make the heart beat right. So you've got to do your upfront work. Be very clear on what you want to accomplish, when, where, and how. Ask those 5 whys. And if you can do that, you can figure out very easily the formula for project management. It's 1/3 common sense. You know what you want to do, you know why you want to do it, and the benefits it should give you, your company, your client. The other third is logic. That's how you're going to plan this thing out. And the last third is process discipline. And that's where it all starts to come out. I talked about the cancer that you don't see, but it's there, why things fail. If you play the plan, stick to your plan, unless there's something instructional, you're going to be just fine. But the moment you let people deviate from that plan, well, I don't have enough money and time for this now, so I guess, but it's very, very simple. It all starts up front. As my dad told me as a kid, crap in, crap out. If you don't do your due diligence up front, you cannot expect the end result to please you.
So, and such wise words of wisdom from your father, and so true. Richard, I wish we could go on and talk more because I know there is so much more to this, but we only have so much time, and we definitely will love to have you on a future episode to kind of elaborate where we left off. I
Sure.
want to first personally thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to be with us here today, and also on the behalf of our team here at Sustainable Success.
Well, thank you very much, Chris and Christopher, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Same here. And we want to give you this opportunity now to let the listeners know where can they find you, what are you up to, and anything that you'd like to provide them.
You can find me on my LinkedIn profile, Richard Brew, Broo, or you can find me on my website, www.truenorthpmpconsulting.com. And I'll be more than happy to serve your audience if they wish to help.
Well, we will definitely do so, Richard. We'll make sure that all of Richard's contact information that will be all in the show notes, not only also across all the platforms. So if you're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, it does not matter. Amazon, iHeart, all that information with Richard's contact information will also be in the show notes there. And if you have for any reason reach out to us, we'll make sure to connect you to Richard as well. So, Richard, thank you again for being with us.
Christopher, thanks again. Have a great day.
Thank you. And listeners, we want to thank you each and every week joining us here at Sustainable Success. Again, we are committed to bringing in subject matter experts like Richard in to help elevate you and your business success to the next level. Till then, everybody, have a great rest of your week and weekend. We'll see you here next Friday at 12 noon East Coast time, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Take care.